Hey, welcome back. It's time to see if we can't hop in the driver's seat and learn what it's to be driven by design. The only show that shows you the future of automotive design. And those doing it today and tomorrow with our driven designer, Bryan Thompson. Hey, Bryan.
Howdy doody.
This is a rare opportunity to do 2 in 1. If those listened last week, this is we're taping these together, but we're going to split this into 2 parts because
actually, I just have one shirt that I wear over and over again.
I'm trying to save you here. I just thought this was so cool, and we had the time. We said, let's do a part 2. And I said, let's do it right now. So we'll spread it over 2 weeks, but we're doing it together here while we're in the moment here. Remind us what we talked about in part 1.
Yeah, that was what's so exciting to be able to talk
and
to
reintroduce them if they just stepped into the show.
Well, I was just about to, if you let me.
Come on, I'm excited.
I am too, man. So we've got back today, again, is Fritz Holst, who was the former head of Hot Wheels and Matchbox brands, developed them, and then has now started his own company called Hackrod. And last podcast, we talked about the connection to cars and what that means from a childhood stance of the connection to the toys to what's happening in this new autonomous world where maybe is some connection going to be lost to the future of manufacturing where there's so much creativity in that the people creating the cars are everybody, that there'll be connection again. So I want to dive into that because we really didn't get into it. And then I really want Felix to be able to tell a bit about his story about leaving the nest of a major corporation and starting his own thing. Because a lot of what this podcast is about is design inspiration and finding that space for you, the listener, to try something new that might or might not be holding you back. And so let's go into that.
So let me set up again my own personal take on this. When I was a little boy, being born in 1956 and growing up in the 60s, I had matchboxes, and then I had Hot Wheels, and was totally entranced with both of them. Partly because my dad worked in the car business. We all our fathers did. We were collecting the toys Daddy made, and then it was like blowing our mind at what could be done with these things through George Barris and the Batmobile kind of cars that they were making at Hot Wheels. But I think to myself, what brilliant marketing. They're training these little 4, 5, 6, 10-year-olds to feel passionate about a product and to want to own it as a kid. We couldn't wait to get our hands on a driver's license and own the real thing someday. Mm-hmm. Yep. I wonder if when we're doing when the car drives itself, when it just picks, it's a box that just picks us up, whether we will lose that, whether we've already lost some of that connection to the cars. We don't name them like we used. They're not the Barracuda anymore. And whether or not when they become fully automatic and just something we rent once in a while or use once in a while, it'll be a toaster and we won't want to have a connection to it anymore.
Well, that's a great place to kick this off. Do you think, Felix, the connection to cars is lost or is it just evolved into a different thing right now?
It's evolved into a different thing. It was one of the biggest journeys I had while I was with Hot Wheels was trying to figure out how do we re-engage with a generation who perhaps haven't got a story to tell around cars anymore. Right?
Interesting.
We were being told by the research group that kids didn't care anymore because mom drove a minivan or a Prius and that was their perception of cars. And not that there's anything wrong with the Prius. There's a lot wrong with the drivers. But
But it's a bus. It's a box.
It's a box.
It's a utility.
It's a utility thing. And the research group was just saying, we've talked to moms and they don't know how to tell a story, and Pixar Cars does well because there's a story, so Hot Wheels is out. Mm. And we looked at that and went, like, don't be so ridiculous.
Yeah.
And in fact, the problem is not that there is a story with Pixar Cars, it's that there is no story with Hot Wheels. And so we went out there and said, tell you what, let's start building our own story. And as if by magic, simultaneously, and to prove the point, Fast and the Furious franchise became the biggest movie franchise on the planet. Yeah. And we were able to turn around to the research group and say, well, tell you what, explain that. You're telling me that cars are irrelevant? Wow. There's a lot more to that story in terms of the demographic and
yeah. But the connection is there.
But the connection is there. So we did the huge Hot Wheels for Real stunts and that entire thing to re-engage.
What was that?
Oh, we decided, we created a whole backstory to Hot Wheels, and we pretended that there was an Area 52 place in the desert where since 1968 or before.
What you mean there isn't?
Oh, there is.
I believed it.
Go watch the videos. I can promise you, I've been there.
Now,
and so we created a backstory, and it was magical, right? We created this whole kind of like YouTube series, and
I remember those. You did these crazy stunts and things like that.
We built a whole bunch of real cars. And then to prove it, because people were calling bullshit, we said, all right, well, I'll tell you what, we'll go and jump a truck the length of a football field in the middle of the Indy 500. And so we partnered with some of our friends, and we built this Pro 2 truck, souped up Pro 2 truck, and we built a 100-foot bedroom door in the middle of the Indy 500, and we rolled, Tanner Faust drove the truck off the top of this bedroom door down an orange track, and jumped it the length of a football pitch in front of 350,000 people live.
Whoa.
At which point there was like, yeah, look, it's real. Hot Wheels test facility. We just did an experiment.
They test real cars to make little ones.
And then we did we put two huge life-size loops in the middle of Los Angeles at the X Games and put two cars through simultaneously through a 70-foot loop. Yeah. And then the one that was less publicized but was equally cool is we did the kind of man with the golden gun barrel roll it was out at San Bernardino Airport. Which
but you didn't do it with an AMC AMX, right?
No. We went
like that was what was in that movie, right?
We went a bit more aggressive on the suspension setup, let's say that.
Nerd.
But we jumped. I think we did like 103 feet ramp barrel roll.
Yeah.
Which is pretty spectacular. And all of this was part of a narrative. All of this was part of storytelling. So I think now the place for brands, it's almost full circle. I mean, we grew up where on a Saturday or Friday night or Saturday night, the only way you could catch a bad guy was to have a badass car, right?
Right.
Knight Rider, Starsky and Hutch, Dukes of Hazzard, A-Team. It goes on and on and on, right?
Which is funny because Knight Rider is the first autonomous car.
Yeah.
If you really think about it, like the technology the idea was there, right?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. So I'm curious about that as we get into autonomous cars. What do you think that connection will be?
Well, I think now.
So will they be our friend, like
Kit?
Like Kit? Will they be?
Hey, buddy, I need your help.
Or will they be a scary thing like 2001? Hal, I don't think you should drive that fast. Or will it be just a device like Alexa or something here? Yeah.
I think it all depends how paranoid you are, really.
You will make your own reality, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it is a great question because I think that the idea of driving is changing, right? So if there's commuting that drives you, but commuting moves you around, but what drives you? And there is this like desire to drive a car.
Yep.
Do you think that that will get lost? Because it feels like such a human thing to want to drive a car.
Let me tell you, over the past few years, I've spent a lot of time at various conferences surrounded by people who have a vested interest in working out the many problems there are and challenges there are with autonomous cars, right? Autonomous cars will happen, and they will happen sooner than you think.
Nothing I'm working on has a steering wheel anymore.
Yeah, and they will probably happen in different ways.
Say that again. You've said that before. You say that so casually. For those of it, because car design is what, 5-6 years in the future or whatever?
Yeah, about 7 years in the future. Yeah, nothing that so I'm a contract designer now. I've spent my career 10 years at Nissan and then went out on my own. But now everything that I work on does not have a steering wheel. And it's amazing to me that this stuff that was science fiction when I was a little boy is now the bread and butter of my income.
So how does that change the experience? And you had a couple other shows. You mentioned a couple of things that maybe you guys can explore. You said maybe it returns to its origin, to the coach and buggy days, where the coach you're riding and you're facing each other and you're interacting with people as opposed to sitting back to back and staring out the window.
Well, I think that's a great question for Felix. I think one of the things that we lose in cars in connection with people is that in this room right here, we're facing each other and we're having a conversation with each other. We're looking at each other. But in a car, you look away from each other. The only people that do that are people like on a soap opera because they're looking at the camera, right? It's just so unhuman to like be crying, and yelling at somebody when you're looking like at there and we're like this, But in an autonomous car, you face each other. So I wonder, does the connection now become more about person to person? And then if so, what happens to the connection to that space?
I think that's very, very interesting, right? That what happens inside of an autonomous car and what does that mean to human interaction and, in fact, productivity and entertainment and all. That's where all the big questions are right now for anybody who's really engaged in the autonomous experience. And then there's also the visceral thing that the automobile offered through the 20th century, which was freedom and thrill and excitement and the notion that you're in control of your own destiny and the open road beckons.
Yeah, Sweet 16 license, got to get it.
Absolutely. Now the old kind of like Sweet 16 license it doesn't happen anymore because today's kid, and I just know this from a lot of research, like today's kid views a car as a liability. Their world, they used to need a car for connectivity, right? That for decades and decades, teenagers could not wait to get their driver's license because it meant they could visit their friend on the other side of town.
Yeah.
And it gave them the feeling of being part of a connected community.
And freedom.
Well, yeah, and freedom. Well, in this day and age of smartphones and connectivity, of digital connectivity, kids would rather be driven and sit in the back talking to all of their friends on a device and then take on the responsibility of insurance and the danger of driving and the costs of the car and paying for gas and whatever that may be.
And let me add one other one. As a parent and not a grandparent, there was a fear that my parents didn't have. When my daughter, a fear of them taking off on their own, a fear of getting in a car crash, a fear of what can happen when they're out of our control and our view, the helicopter parents that my generation is famous for, which is exactly the opposite of what I felt. I wanted to get away. That was all that freedom. I couldn't wait to be on my own. And I wonder if the other thing is I've seen crash and burn is bike sales. Kids don't get bikes like they used to because the bike allowed you to leave the neighborhood, and now the parent doesn't want you out of their sight because you're going to get abducted or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think
so. Maybe the self-driving is a little more protected space again.
Oh, I mean, believe me, I live in Los Angeles. I can't wait for self-driving.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think what it's going to lead to is it's going to lead to the very clear differentiation of vehicle type and vehicle use. I believe that we're going to see a fragmentation of the leisure market. Right, the idea of the Sunday car, the idea of like
leisure driving.
Yeah, I mean, and also if you think about things, it's getting easier and easier and easier now to not actually own your car. Right, whether it's Uber or whether it's the beginning of the car share, vehicle share programs that we talked earlier. You mentioned Volvo. There are others out there now that literally, you're going to need an SUV, so just have it for the day rather than.
Just to clarify, Volvo has a program where you can pay a certain amount of money every month and you get access to a line of cars rather than owning one car, which is when you see that happening, you know that the business model of the car industry is changing because for a big manufacturer to go, wait a minute, this is different than leasing. This is different than buying. This is subscription. Something's changing. Yeah. And do you think, Felix, that this idea of driving will we look back on will kids born today look at driving the way we would look at like smoking in front of a baby? Like how could you let somebody have control of a 2,000-pound machine? It seems so dangerous. Or will that need to sort of the need that a human had to ride a horse or a motorcycle before there were cars, will that still be there? That need for control, the freedom of yourself, or is it evolving in a different way? Are we just going to have a future of appliances that move us about like Wall-E?
I think that if you look at horses, for example, right? Horses very, very rapidly went from utility to leisure in the early part of the 20th century.
Yes, right? That's true. Yeah,
and now horses, there are many different echelons of the equestrian world, from horses that trade hands for millions and millions of dollars, all the way down to kind of just utility, especially if you live in the countryside. And it's something that's a pleasant way of traversing the countryside. It's a hobby. It gives people a thrill. And I think that what we'll end up with, and I don't think it will become quite so niche as horses. But I think we'll end up looking at the world of whether it's pure leisure or it's utility, and then when you combine that with what technology is going to afford us, in that the idea of many, like a very, very splintered, diverse type utility type for vehicles will allow a lot more flexibility in that market.
But will it be like the horses have become just for the wealthy? They can afford to house them and feed them and take care of them and have one, or tie in what you're doing where you can make your own car, 3D print your car, where everybody will have their own car because it's so simple and so easy and affordable.
Well, I think that, and
that's a great. Well, let's let Felix explain here what you're doing now, because it's a great segue to this. You mentioned before in the last podcast just a bit about you had left Hot Wheels, you were working with a brand called Hackrod, which is your company that you created. Now, that's a great segue, because so I always think that things happen in polar trends, right? Let's say that the answer to this question is ultimately yes. There is commuting that will happen and you will disconnect from cars, but there's a different way you'll connect to cars. And it sounds like what you're doing is that that will foster that connection. And how do you see that happening?
Yeah, I mean, my fundamental philosophy is that anybody should be able to design and make anything, right? That's my big picture, like TED Talk.
Oh, yeah.
This is why we exist. We believe at Hackrod that anybody should be able to make anything.
In a world.
In the world. We use that all the time.
Just go to your
part of it's having a movie director for a partner.
And a voice like that, like yours.
In a world. Well, you should hear his voice. It's even funnier. But the idea is never before has so much power been available to so many, right? That's another movie.
Right.
Never before.
I think you should just do my voiceover.
And so
we need Don LaMontagne.
I mean, while I'm here, now that we're into the second recording, maybe I could also do some kind of little. Like, have you got any commercial work or sound bites?
Please, we need a sponsor.
Believe me, I've got a startup. If you want to pay me to do commercial work, I'm in. If there's any voiceover agents out there, please get in touch with. So really, our role, what we're building a digital platform to connect all of these new technologies, which are incredibly powerful: artificial intelligence, generative design, machine learning, virtual reality, 3D printing. It goes on and on and on, right? None of this existed just a few years ago, right?
Yeah, and kind of to help people understand what that means is that the idea of making a little bit of money on a lot of cars, that is a huge investment for the car industry. The car companies are always are so conservative because if they make one mistake, if a Corolla fails, it is catastrophic for the company. But what you're talking about is that investment is no longer relevant in the new world because you have all of these small niche ways to make a product personalized and make it profitable.
And I think it starts where we're actively engaged with some fairly big brand partners right now, exploring the space, right? What does it mean to an established car company, especially in the world of autonomous and electric, where they're looking for new ways of adding that personal touch or that flamboyance or that extra kind of thing that calls them out amongst the competition. And so, hey, guess what? You can design your own bumper. You can design your own fascia and then have it 3D printed, right?
And it's your own. There's only one.
Yeah, and it's a component. I mean, you could put your name on the. You want to buy a new Ford truck, then you could actually have your name 3D printed, or in fact, robotic metal forming, which is really exciting. Incremental metal forming.
So they still make the underlying platform, and then you just dress it up.
You get to customize your own stuff, right? You get to design your own, and then long term, the goal is, with the help of artificial intelligence and generative engineering, that eventually you can go more to base components. Choose your desired electric skateboard or powertrain, or if you want to get into the world, if you really want to get into the world of 21st century hot rodding, virtual environment. Here's your choice of crate engines from the major suppliers. Choose your engine. Maybe you want to put this transmission with it. The adapter plate gets automatically 3D printed, and artificial intelligence knows what it's got to do. I want suspension from this manufacturer. And
so then does the manufacturer just sell you the design, and you're the part supplier?
Orchestrator.
I think that the way I look at it is, right, that there are, there's billions of dollars a year spent on R&D in the world of, let's just look at engines. And we're never going to say, why would you ever design your own engine? Why would you ever buy a new one when there's thousands of works of art sitting in junkyards everywhere?
Still viable.
I mean, God, you could go and buy an AMG Mercedes V8
right,
for like nothing
and use it. But do you think that, so in this world, let's imagine this world where people are riding around in their Ubers that pick them up, and they never buy these cars. They're just subscribing to the service of mobility. They get picked up, they get dropped off. Maybe there's hotel room cars that you rent for the night. All sorts of crazy scenarios that we've talked about before, like, you know, waiting outside the clubs.
They're doing it in Japan right now.
Right.
Yeah, literally, you rent the car for the afternoon just so you can sleep.
Right, exactly. You know,
private room. Yeah.
All of the shenanigans that goes on in cars, and that's happening in these sort of, you know, service industry cars. But there's this other world, because that is not connecting the way people desire to connect, of this world where you're creating your own car and having so much connection. Do you see that happening as like a polar trend? Do you see that as like reserved for the wealthy, or who's going to do that?
The thing that drives me, right, is not to design high-end sports cars for the wealthy. It's to use technology to allow kids who maybe can no longer afford to go to university, maybe they can never experience what it's like to actually play with components in a car, in effect democratize invention.
That's kind of amazing when you say that, because if you think about it, you are the perfect person to start this, because that's what Hot Wheels was doing.
Well, let's go. I mean, in the last episode, we talked about where did Hot Wheels come from. Hot Wheels was born out of the American hot rod culture, right? And who were the hot rodders? The hot rodders were not wealthy 35, 40-year-old executives.
Exactly.
The hot rodders were 16, 18-year-old kids who couldn't get anything new and fancy because there wasn't anything, and they were raiding the junk piles of America for old Model T Fords and Model A's and putting the biggest engine they could afford in them and stripping them down and creating the most exciting cars of the period.
And creating a new aesthetic that didn't exist.
Which was then copied by the big OEMs. And in fact, when you look at things like Autorama, Futurama, that GM and Ford ran through the kind of mid-50s, and they actually started putting the hot rodders' work on display to drive interest in their own designs. Then we're in a world now where, I mean, it's in the company name, right? Hack Rod. It's a hot rod for hackers.
Right? Exactly.
It's hacker culture meets hot rod culture.
Yes, I love that.
And Hot Wheels was born out of hot rod culture. Hack Rod was born out of Hot Wheels culture.
Yeah.
And the philosophy is, how do we give 21st century kids who are completely digital native the tools to invent new things that suits them.
And also to create their own aesthetic.
And to create their own aesthetic, which then in turn can lead to new industry.
And also leads to this connection again.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like this is fascinating, so we could talk for hours about it, but I want to give you a chance to tell a little bit of your story. We have about 5 minutes left.
Sure.
One of the things I think that's so inspiring about somebody like you is that you've been in a very in a position that affects lives, affects culture and toys and people's lives at a young age, and you're also in this sort of nest at that point, working for a large company. As somebody who has also left a large nest, and I like to tell the story of what it's like to leave that nest. What is it like to leave Hot Wheels and start Hack Rod? Let's start with what drove you to leave?
There were a number of things, right? That I was doing amazing things. Like I tell people, like, well, when the best job in the world becomes a pain in the ass, you've got to make a change. Yeah. And while through those final couple of years where we were doing incredible things, we were setting world records and building real cars, and I just started getting I started getting disgruntled at first with the 20th century manufacturing model and how everything was geared towards the shareholder and product was getting worse because to me, the mathematics of 20th century mass manufacturing and the China manufacturing model just didn't make any sense anymore.
Right. So there's like a voice inside you.
There was a voice inside me going, this is wrong. This is self-devouring.
And for those watching the video, he raised only one finger when he said there's a voice inside of him.
Voices. For me, it would be like lots of voices. Some of them have ponytails.
I'm very focused. And that voice is very focused. And then also, I started realizing you begin to understand your notion of success changes, right? That I had at the time I had a health problem, which I needed to focus on. I had recently got married. I had my first child. So your notion of success dramatically changes as you get older, right? It was no longer about having a car collection and consuming. And also I started realizing, if I really want to be truly successful, whether that is I can pay off a home in the hills and become an artist at some point before I'm too old to enjoy doing that, or whether it's no, I want to be really rich, and therefore the only way I'm going to do that is to do it on my own terms and take a risk. Whatever that reason was, I realized that I needed to make a change, and then I got frustrated with politics within a large company.
But that voice, so many people don't listen to that voice, and that voice nags and it gets louder.
It's a very scary voice.
It's a scary voice until you listen to it. Tell me about that moment that you did listen to it. Now Hot Wheels is in your little tiny review mirror behind you, and you're now away from the income that you had. You have to make it yourself. What keeps you up at night? What makes you keep going? What's scary?
I mean, there's a lot of different responses to that, right? The thing that keeps me up.
I mean, the question had 3 parts, so there's a lot of different responses.
So I didn't. There's at the time that I did this, there's more than me. If I just been like a single dude, I would have been like, all right, then how am I going to do this? Sell the house in LA, move out to such and such. Let's keep going, whatever. But I wasn't. I had a mortgage. I had a house that we'd worked for years and years and years to build up to. I had a very young child. And so I set myself up to be like, right, I'm going to do it the hard way. And so what keeps me up at night is making sure that the stress is not killing my relationship and that my family is safe under the home that we worked for years.
Yeah.
The exciting bit was to step out of the corporate environment and realize how slow these companies work.
Yeah.
And it was like going back to university.
Yes.
The first couple of years of hanging out with we worked with Autodesk, we worked with Siemens, we worked with big tech companies. Because of our background, they were happy to throw back the curtain and show us the future. And suddenly I was like, oh my God, the world's moving so fast. And if I'd stayed where I was, I just would have
missed it.
I would have missed it. I fundamentally knew there was a tidal wave coming.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't see it yet.
Right.
As soon as I left the company, I saw the tidal wave.
Right.
And that was like, all right, I better grab the surfboard because I can sit on the beach or I can grab the surfboard and ride the wave.
Ride the wave. And that's such a great message for people who are frustrated with their jobs. You have to, if you listen to that voice and you take the risk, your life changes when you go out there. And it is good. It's like I always say, it's like flying a plane. Sometimes and it always runs out of gas. But the fuel plane always seems to come back.
The fundamental thing, though, is to make sure that you also recognize the value of others.
Yeah.
Recognize what you can't do well and make sure you've got really good people who can do that.
And help.
Because it's really hard.
Yeah.
And there's no way I could be doing this unless we found the right people around us to do some of the stuff that does not come naturally to me.
To understand talents that you have and don't have.
So before we run out of gas, how do they reach you and find out more if they want to talk to you about this?
I want to keep going. This is so good. Part 3.
All right.
Same shirt, different day.
Go
ahead. How do people find you?
Yeah, you can get me. I mean, you can follow me on social media. I don't use pseudonyms. At Felix Holst.
FELIX
HOLST. Or you can follow Hackrod. There's a Facebook page. You can contact us through our website directly at info@hackrod.com.
How far along is Hackrod? Is this seed invested, self-invested? Have you got investors? Where are you at in this
bootstrapped it. We bootstrapped it for the first 4 or 5 years. I sold the car collection, which was just necessary. Like gradually, I'm down to a secondhand, very rough Audi Avant.
Secondhand.
It'll be a classic someday.
Then we're in a seed investment period right now. We're about to launch the first public facing examples. Probably by the end of the year, you'll be able to log on to Autonomo, which is the product.
Oh,
Autonomo.
We got a reveal here.
And hopefully we're actually working with there's a company that spun out a Jaguar Land Rover called Arc Motorcycles. They've just launched their first bike. It's an electric super bike, the Vector. They saw what we were doing and said, this is how we want to sell our motorcycle.
Excellent.
And
so will you originally be like an aftermarket option to customize these things as you move towards actually building your own platform that can produce it from the ground up?
I think the easiest way to say it is if you imagine the platform literally like a boulevard, and you go to Autonomo and you stand on a boulevard and there are stores on the boulevard that at first there's only a couple. And then gradually more and more shops will open and you can go into, whatever brand and experience a brand in an entirely new way. It's a community. It's a virtual boulevard.
Oh, wow.
And the tool set we're developing can be used in many different ways depending on what the needs of the brand are.
And will the brands accept that you're going to customize their baby? Brian's going to take the car he did at Nissan and you're going to change it and put a different face on it?
Well, there's two ways.
Designers will cry all over the world.
There's two ways of looking at that, right? The aftermarket has established for decades.
Yeah, exactly.
That people want to do that.
People want to do their own stuff.
But also what we're educating certain brands. We're getting into some discussions with some big transport brands. Excellent. To say you should look at the way that you offer people the personalization options is no longer log onto a website and choose the color of the leather and the wheel and the accessories. That in fact you need to open up a little more to your data and allow people to configure things within a templated design philosophy. And it can open. I mean, look at sneakers, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Mongolian barbecue with
my Adidas. It's Adidas, by the way, not Adidas.
Adidas.
Adidas. I never heard that.
A Nike.
Americans say Adidas.
Nike ID have proven that people will pay through the nose.
Yeah.
To visit a site to design their own stuff.
Well, and there it is, right? So expression leads to connection.
Yeah.
And I think that's what it always goes back to. And folks, I hope I love this podcast. I hope you get inspired by it. Stay inspired. Definitely do your own thing. Felix Holst, thanks so much for coming today.
How do they connect with you? You always fail to tell us how they can connect with you.
I'm Bryan Thompson. I'm just a redneck from Arizona. But I am just on social media at Bryan S. Thompson, Bryan with a Y. Bryan S. Thompson on all platforms, or Bryan Thompson Design. You can spell it right,
all
spell it
roads
wrong.
lead to Rome here. All right. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, guys. Cheers, Paul.
You've been listening again to the guys doing Driven by Design, the only show that shows you the future of automotive design, one car at a time. Right here in Orange County's only community radio station, OCTalkRadio.net.